Hello everyone and welcome to Avacon. We have an exciting afternoon planned and we hope you can stay with us for its entirety. Our next featured speaker is from British Columbia, Canada. Gord Holden began working in public education at 22 years of age and has won numerous teaching awards since. He has most recently received the Virtual Education Journal's Reader's Choice Award as the Innovator of 2014. Over the span of 25 years, he has given workshops about using gamification, has used flipped classroom methods, and incorporated virtual environments into his teaching practice. 10 years ago, the move to distance learning demanded the move to multi-user environments to facilitate the creation of a community of learners.
User joined your channel.
As a result, he has successfully implemented this program, which led to his current position as the Director of Immersive Technology for the largest independent school in British Columbia. Friends and colleagues, it is my pleasure to introduce to you our next featured speaker, Gord Holden.
Well, hello there, everyone. I hope that you can hear me okay. Can I get some sort of indication that my voice is working? Wonderful. Thank you. Yes, I come to you from beautiful Vancouver Island off the coast of the province of British Columbia in Canada, where I currently work as the Director of Immersive Technology for a school of about 10,000 students, 2,000 of which are full-time with us. I have the good fortune of being hired by the superintendent, Greg Bitgood of Heritage Christian Online School, who sees virtual learning environments as the future of education. Now, I didn't always work in such a positive environment, and I think that that's really important and actually a good thing. And so that's really the basis of what I'm going to be talking about today, is how you institute virtual learning environments and get around all the negativity that is associated with it, because we've done so successfully, and there are reasons for that I'm hoping to share.
User disconnected from your channel.
Now, I would like to say that while the focus will be K to 12 education, we're also making inroads into universities as well, and that the talk today, I think, really applies to businesses as well. Now, most of you, it's good to see so many familiar faces, and this is how most of you will recognize me as Golden Gray Moon in Second Life. It's an environment where I've made many, many good friends, and many great mentors have worked with me too. And so much of what I'm speaking about is perhaps due to the influence of many of you that are here right now. I'm deeply honored to be asked to share, and I hope that I'm going to be sharing things with you today that are going to make these kinds of pictures that you see up
User in your channel timed
go
out.
away. For most of us here, the failure of the education system as a whole to utilize virtual learning environments
your channel
is a tragedy and perplexing, to say the least. The pedagogical support for utilizing virtual learning environments in education is unquestionable, and in such environments, children can comfortably engage in the role play that Vygotsky sees as so fundamental in the development of the individual. Just imagine the joy of Brunner had he lived to see the prospect of schools having virtual learning environments in which students can safely explore and engage in situations that they might otherwise find too stressful or too dangerous. And yet, the use of this technology doesn't seem to engender the kind of success that we would hope for and that we would expect. Given that teaching is a field where so many teachers care so much about the success of their students, how is this possible? Well, so many teachers who understand the potential of virtual learning environments have worked themselves to the bone to make it work for their students, only to find their efforts unappreciated. I'm constantly hearing about teachers here and there across North America and indeed the world who have worked so hard to create their environments and make them into wonderful learning experiences for their students. And then something unexpected happens, or a complaint happens, and the whole program gets turned down. What clearly seems to be a really good idea quickly turns into a nightmare. Now, I want to make it clear that I'm not here to present myself as the complete expert on how to bring virtual learning environments to education or business. There's many people who have done so successfully. I can only speak to my journey. I myself have been the beneficiary of plenty of criticism. And it's my hope that sharing what I've learned from this will be helpful to some others that are here. And as others have shared their secrets of their survival and their success with me, I just hope to be passing along some of the same of that to you as well today. But I want to forewarn you, much of what I'm about to share may well make you uncomfortable. Because I'm not going to try to enable you to defeat the challenges that you face, but rather to try to help you to understand and to embrace them. This is because in the end, it's not about you, it's not about me, it's not about us, or our needs or our perceptions, but it's about those other stakeholders that are in this relationship that we call education. So
User
to
was
begin
moved
with,
to your channel.
this is a shared journey. It requires compromises that may need to be made by you. There's little room in education or in business for being patronizing or prejudicial. So I'm going to begin by being very pragmatic. The beginning of understanding this journey is to deal with the fact that what makes you and perhaps me happy doesn't
User left your
necessarily make
channel.
those around us happy. If we're going to build what we want to call an immersive technology program or a community of learners with a firm foundation, it needs the support of all the stakeholders. You simply can't thumb your nose at those around you. Now, there may be other stakeholders, but I would suggest that there's 4 that are
User
really
left your
important.
channel.
There are the partners in the marriage of the school's business or businesses, technology, and finances. There are the students themselves. There are the parents of the students, and there are the administrators. And so I want to take a quick look at each one of those right now. First of all, the technology. No matter how much you might personally like a program, you need to ask if the infrastructure is available to run it. I heard just the other day, for instance, that Chromebook doesn't run Minecraft. So as enthusiastic as you might be about Minecraft, if your school runs Chromebooks, it's not available. That could be wrong, but if it's right, you want to take that into consideration. There also needs to be technical support. So the personnel within the school district itself. There needs to be a compatibility with the hardware and the browsers that would use it. And it needs to run dynamically and smoothly without bandwidth issues and challenges. So I was in a school where I ran one program, for instance, and it shut down all the other computers. The kids were having a wonderful time, but nobody else in the school could do the things that they needed to do. So these things need to be considered. There's also the economy in this marriage as well. And the economy has to do with there needs to be the ability to meet the financial commitment. So the initial funding costs, in other words. There's also the cost perhaps of services, such as troubleshooting and upgrades. You need to look at those contracts. You also need to have a provider that has financial means to ensure its survival. So how many of you remember way back when in the early days of Google Lively and the promise that was there? And speaking of there, that's another program that went down.
User
Back
joined
up
your
again now,
channel.
but in the meantime, many people lost their programs that they were using therewith. And then, of course, who can forget about Teen Grid, as well. And that was just a
User joined
disaster
your
for so
channel.
many people.
User joined your channel.
Then, of course, there is the
User
students.
joined your channel.
Given the vast amount of attention that's given to the gaming industry by our children, I would argue that it's not only the wise thing for us to exploit its power to engage, but I would suggest that it's an obligation as well. You can see in this picture here. I mean, I went to great deal of effort to make sure that in my classroom there was technology. You can see off to the left. I used a lot of technology, but I also pushed the use of books. And so I made sure that there was just the best of books available in the classroom. But you can see that one of the boys has got a Nintendo DS, and that trumped everything. And those are just the facts. That's the way the kids are. And so these resources, however, that we move to need to be vetted for academic considerations. We're talking about the student. We need to be sure that they're learning from them. Okay. Whoops. The resources need to be responsibly explored and utilized. We need to ask ourselves questions like, do the students have the prerequisite skills? Now, while this seems like an obvious question, you're not going to ask kids perhaps to work on something where they don't have the ability to keyboard or spell or something like that, and it's needed. It goes beyond that. While a student might be capable of doing all that they're asked for, if the resource lacks a challenge, it's not going to last very long. If it has a learning curve to create projects that's so demanding that they spend all their time learning to create the project and they don't learn anything about the subject of that project, then you've got a problem as well. It's also a problem if the resource is just eye candy and kill and drill. I know at the initial distance learning school that I went to, somebody got the idea that we should be using mathletics. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And I'm sure that it works well for many people, but it was my experience, having looked at it, that it wouldn't take long before the kids would be bored with it. And sure enough, they were quite excited to play it for the first half hour before they learned how to game the game and they learned how to cheat the system. And from that point on, it was all about getting points, and it wasn't about any learning taking place. So it was a waste of money that could have gone into something much, much better. There's also the need for it to be a part of the overarching vision for learning. Is it just a keep busy activity, or does it actually fit in? You know, one of the programs that we also used in our district was Oregon Trails. And I use that because it's kind of an iconic symbol of the early days of gaming and education. And, it looked very, very good, but I discovered very soon that the school district had banned it in our school district. And I thought that was pretty surprising because they seemed to be very much on board with my whole approach to education. But they had banned it, they told me, because what would happen, and I didn't use Oregon Trails because it didn't fit into my curriculum, but the kids would get to the place where they had to shoot deer, and that's where they'd stop. And they would keep banging away on the spacebar until they'd killed their fill of deer, which could take half an hour or more, but certainly the great proportion of the class. And not only did it end up being a waste of their time in the classroom, but it ended up breaking the keyboards as well. Now, the other thing is, you have to ask yourself, are you able and willing to be a skilled practitioner with that resource? Because if you're not, you won't be able to assist the students when they need their assistance. I would also add that it could be rightly argued that the gamification of education is a two-edged sword. It has the capacity to do more harm than good when it abandons the standards that our students should be aspiring to embrace. Does the environment that you're using contain the opportunity for conducting acts of violence or vandalism or sexual misconduct? Is it a moderated environment? Is it a positive environment? Or does it lend itself to creating the kind of socialization found in the novel Lord of the Flies? In most cases, it's been my experience that it's the opposite. Or it's the latter, I should say. I was just talking to a professor, actually talking to the deans of a university a couple days ago in Calgary, and the dean in charge of the school was saying that her home had been a happy place until her older daughter had gotten involved with a resource, and I won't name which one it is, but it brought a whole lot of swearing into their household. and it turned their house into a very dark place. Well, that's just not on, and yet it's a resource that's used in many, many, many classrooms with kids as young as grade 1 and grade 2. We had a school in the district where I grew up that had a girl that just committed suicide not long ago because of a lack of concern for safety issues. The student was participating in an environment that led them to a place of great psychological harm. I was looking at the news article. I was quite interested. Nobody ever named which world it was that she was in. Turns out it was Small Worlds, and I've looked at all of these worlds, and Small Worlds actually looks to be quite a good environment, but it's a place where there were predators that were waiting. And I'll be the first to tell people that most children are safer in these virtual environments, predators are not, than they are walking to the corner grocery store. I understand that. But the problem, of course, for us as educators is that we're responsible for these children and where we place them. And if we place them in environments where they're susceptible or vulnerable to these predators, then we could end up with a serious problem and our whole program goes down the tubes. Which is perhaps a nice segue into the parents. Okay, and at this point, it looks as if my slides are not wanting to move. Let me just take a look at the, yep, not able to go to the next one. Okay, so I'm going to perhaps have to reload the presentation. And that's not working either. Wonderful. Okay, that's all right. The next picture is a picture of a man standing outside with his pants lowered almost down to his knees. He has his underwear on. He's out cutting the lawn, and the mother turns to her son and says, "Your dad says that he'll pull his pants up when you do." There we go. It looks like I might be able to reload these now. Thank you. Oops. These are great slides. I don't think you should miss out on them. Too much fun putting these together. There we go. A quick review of everything that we've talked about. Okay, there we go. Now we need to cut these parents some slack when it comes to being afraid of new things and styles. We have to remember that their generation, our generation, isn't the first or the only one that was anxious about new technology. When we look back at the Egyptian times, the Egyptians avoided the alphabet for something like 2,000 years. Their fear was that writing would replace memory. And without memory, things could be lost forever. I guess papyrus didn't stick around all that much, and there were problems with committing things to writing. And Plato picked up on that as well. Plato said that the written word represented the end of discourse. And I have some great stories about that. He was absolutely right. The fact that when things are written down, they become gospel truth. And people dislike arguing against things that are written. And that may have had its place at some time, but now, and with the advent of the internet and people being able to write almost anything and have anything published, it's a very real problem, the written word. We really need to be involved in discourse when it comes to working with problems. The invention of the phonograph also brought about great fear that writing itself would be deserted. People would no longer write. Everything would be on phonographs. And it was thought also that telephones would bring about the end of social contact between people. Well, we know that this just isn't true. This just hasn't happened. The danger, for the most part, is less. The writing hasn't been the disaster that we thought it might be, and certainly phonographs haven't brought down civilization as well. But it hasn't always, this change hasn't always brought things for the better either. This poor lady is a little bit confused by change, as we all can be at times. So we've talked about the marriage between technology and economy. We've talked about the children. We've talked about the parents. And the fourth leg, if you will, to this table, if you want to build a very strong foundation, is the administration. Now, even changes for the better can make individuals uncomfortable. And, I don't think that that's any different for administrators. And in fact, it may be particularly challenging for administrators who don't tend to get where they are by having taken risks. Now, you can help your administrator to become visionary by opening up their minds to the possibilities, but most importantly, by ensuring that the VLEs, or the virtual learning environments used for your school, are a good match for the technology and the support available, a sound decision economically, academically defensible, engaging to the students, safe, monitored, secured from outsiders, not a gateway to adult sites. Any of my teachers who use a link that has an ad on it to something questionable has to answer to me for that. There are ways of getting around that. There's no need for it. I work in a very conservative school where we have no parent complaints, because nothing that we use leads to or utilizes anything that's questionable. It's not a gateway to questionable ads. The resources aren't a gateway to addiction issues. And by the way, I think that that's going to be a real strong pushback in the years ahead as psychologists start coming forward with more and more stories of addictions. I was talking to a parent not long ago, a teacher that's involved in virtual learning environments themselves. And they had a child that was given a full scholarship through university by the NSA. And that just gives you some sort of indication as to the promise that this child had. But when the report card came home at the end of the year, and she had never had to worry about these report cards before, because they were always a straight A student, but the student failed grade 12. They had lost all their scholarships, and it had incredible effects on the family. Why? Well, because the child was involved in a multiplayer game that is used in many, many schools, and it's a very positive influence. Perhaps I'll say, at least I would like to believe that it's a positive influence. Myself, I wouldn't use it because it's intrinsic to the game are weapons and violence and those kinds of things. So we couldn't use them, but if we ever did, I think there'd be lots of questions as to why we would want to, because there are other choices. So there's a Dakota proverb that goes like this: if you're riding a dead horse, you should dismount. That seems very simple, but of course that just needs to be an option. And the question is, are there options? And I have to tell you that there are. We run a very successful program without the opportunity for any of the problems that we've talked about. I have students who have been covering much of their curriculum, for instance, through Quest Atlantis since grade 5. And they're now going into grade 9 and wanting to be sure that we're continuing to run the program for grade 9. It's engaging, it's safe, it's monitored, has everything that we've asked for. It's free, for Pete's sake. And yet there's a lot of teachers who don't use it, which is mind-boggling to me. The ability to learn how to build is something, well, let me just put it this way. It's like Minecraft on steroids. And there you have it, the ability for kids to create incredible structures. They can build a house within a day, that is very, very realistic. Now, I have visited classrooms where they've been working on things like maybe building a pyramid, and what they end up with is a sugar cube pyramid that takes days and days to build. They might be working on something a little bit more creative, and it might take them a month. But that's the only thing that they accomplish during that month. They're not really doing much in the way of curriculum. With 3DU, which is in the Active Worlds program as well, platform, kids take over and build entire cities. And they can do this in a day. It's just unbelievable to me what the kids can accomplish. So when they're studying Rome, they build Rome in a day.
User joined your
When they're
channel.
studying Greece, they build the Acropolis and the temples, and they put the gods inside and infuse it with all of the research. European civilizations as well, infusing them with their history, the language, and the culture. They go and they tell their stories around campfires. They
User joined
practice
your
their
channel.
French in the shadow of the Eiffel Tower. They build contextual settings for their book clubs and for their class meetings. These are student builds. My students can run with the rhinos. They can go and they can swim with the sharks. Using Unity, now, that's 3DU. And, I would invite you to come to my YouTube channel, Gord Holden, and take a look at some of the presentations on 3DU. It's new and it's exciting. And if you thought that Active Worlds, for instance, was an old resource and outdated, I don't think hardly a week goes by. I think last year there were 40 updates during the course of the year, so almost one a week. So it's really been upgrading all the way along. Now, another resource that we've been using, I've been getting into Unity 3D. And so we've created, using Reaction Grid and Jibe, we've got Francophone World, where, for instance, now we have a school in Alberta that caters to students who live in communities, far-flung communities, where they are native French speakers, but nobody else in that community is. So they meet together in their Francophone village, and they have classrooms, fully operational classrooms that they work together with. This isn't one of them. And that's been quite successful. Now, we also have sort of a parallel program that we're running with a client that we're actually working on getting and should have this week. And this is, for instance, as you can see, a medieval village. The assets for this medieval village cost $40. That was it. Then there's 4 more packages that go along with this. So if this is just one, please begin to try and understand what this village is going to look like when you use all 4 packages. The artwork, by the way, the artists that are putting together these kinds of things are getting as much as $1 million a year for their work. So those people that are in other environments and struggling to get by, there's a huge need for people who can do the artwork in these builds. And it's very, very practical. So for instance, in my discussions with the deans at this university, I give them an example like this and say, well, if you would like to have a university campus that's not going to cost you very much money at all, here's one here, because each one of those buildings is a room. And you can go inside those rooms, and the voice is proximal. So you can have like 30 people in the room and people walking past, and they don't hear what's going on inside. So we could probably have about 15 different classes going on in that build at the same time. They're impressed. they're looking at spending $10 million on an addition to their campus. They now realize that they don't need to. They can use this instead. Now, I should point out, if you want to have a really, really good look at this, and here's another place, if those of you looking for something a bit more iconic, you can go into this building here and go to the second floor. You can enter our geography classroom, and there's slideshows up on the wall about the geography of Canada. And yes, this replaces brick and mortar. Absolutely. If you want to get a really good look at this, Cindy Bolero, who's in the room with us right now, I don't know if you want to stand up, Cindy. She's
left your channel.
Doing a tour, of this particular resource. And I mean, it's good for you to see this resource for the sake of all the resources that are out there that are using Unity. The information, maybe what I'll do is I'll just put the link to it in case you don't run across it in the chat. So it's on the 28th, so it's not happening right away, but it's happening soon. Now, unfortunately, I could take another hour to show everyone about how the resources that we use do everything that an educator needs them to do. They do it cheaply, do it simply, effectively, appropriately. They do all of these things, but most will simply respond by saying, well, they're not Second Life or OpenSim. Well, this is true. And this is the result of an intentional and purposeful search on my part for resources that are not only based on all the things that our students can do with them, but for the things that they cannot do on them as well. And I'd like to put it out there that perhaps that's even more important than what the kids can do, the things that they cannot do, because those are the things that are getting people in trouble. And teachers are losing their jobs and their respect, and with their colleagues and with their parents and even with their students, if they're getting them into environments that are irresponsible. So while others fret about the challenges of bringing virtual learning environments into education, we do so at our school without worry, without concern, free to enjoy the magic of the medium. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the resources that are shown here, and there's many more, I would invite you to contact me at any of those social media sites. I'd also like to just make mention, I'm going to be leaving here immediately after to tape for a friend, Julie, who is doing a presentation at Rockcliffe site. And she's been working with a virtual learning environment that I think has been flying under the radar for some time. And it also meets all the criteria of which I've described, and something that I'm going to have to be looking really closely at. It runs on everything but your electric toothbrush. And so I'm headed there to tape her presentation that's coming up. So that might be something you might want to take a look at too. But I want to thank you for being a kind audience. There is some time for questions. I don't mind ending early, but I would just love to answer questions if some people have some.
If you will please type those in text chat for Gord, and I will help him also field them.
Okay. And there's the YouTube connection for you to see a lot of different resources that are being used.
User disconnected from your channel.
Thank you. Yeah, the presentation is in Rock. Oh dear. It's the name of it. Rockcliffe University, of course. Now, how much labor did which take, Bill? Oh, I'm not sure the name of the presentation. I just know that it's on at 2 o'clock, and I can I think that I just have it saved in my as a Rockcliffe in my teleports. But if you want to friend me, you you could join me there in a few minutes. Right, it's on Avacon Grid here. Yeah, and you know, it seems to me that what Julie's presenting is going to shake some things up a bit. But I'd like to say, as well, I think that Unity has tremendous potential. And really, again, I know that Active Worlds, you're talking about 20 years ago, Active Worlds started up. But its age, just like when we look in the mirror, maybe we begrudge the fact that we don't look as young as we used to look, but we can also see someone in the mirror that has a wealth of experience and has learned some things. And I think that Active Worlds understands that if they're going after the adult market, they're not going to be able to compete with things like Second Life, because they're not going to go places that Second Life goes. And so they're not going to get many of the people who go there. But they are very much after the educational market. And so they've geared their software in 3DU to do that. So if you look that up, I should get the website for you. Actually, you could just find it easy enough by emailing me. I'll put my email address in here as well. And folks, I'm very, very good about helping anyone that I can in any way that I can.
Any other questions for Gord?
Were there some questions I missed? I'm sorry I wasn't very good at keeping an eye on the chat.
No, actually, you pretty much grabbed what was there.
Wonderful.
Yes, thank you all very much. I don't see any other questions coming up. Yes, thank you, Gord, very much for coming today. We appreciate that you spent the time with us here in VWBPE. It was a great, way to kind of inaugurate this new space for us. Thank you so much, and thank you all very much for coming. We do have 3 breakout sessions right after Gord's that are coming up. One of them was already mentioned. But we do have in Rockcliffe 2, we have Crossing the Bridge to Immersive Educational Experiences. In Rockcliffe 3, we have Immersion Equals Engagement. And then Rockcliffe 4, we have Unicam Earth Isle. So please stick around. Thank you so much.
User disconnected from your